Good afternoon. Welcome to today's webinar, the Diversity Toolkit, the Office of Student Inclusion and Diversity. My name is Scott Hicks, and I'm the Director of the Teaching and Learning Center. And on behalf of Nico Nino of Online Learning, we are thrilled to have you joining us today. Please know that this webinar is being recorded so that it can be posted to the Online Learning's YouTube channel tomorrow. So for anyone who cannot join us, or if you want to watch this again for the resources you're about to learn about, please check online tomorrow for the Office of Online Learning's YouTube channel. So I want to first begin by introducing Dr. Locklear. We'll turn it over to him for the presentation. If you have questions, please note them in the chat, and then we'll have some time at the end of the presentation to share those questions and discuss what we've learned today. So thank you again for joining us. Dr. Locklear, pronouns he, him, his, is the Director of the Office of Student Inclusion and Diversity and an Adjunct Associate Professor in the Department of American Indian Studies, both here at UNCP. He earned his PhD in Educational Studies with a concentration in Higher Education and a minor in Educational Research Methodology at UNC Greensboro. He also earned a Master's of Public Administration, a Bachelor of Arts in American Indian Studies from UNCP, as well as his Bachelor of Arts in History from North Carolina State University. Dr. Locklear is an enrolled citizen of the Lumbee Tribe of North Carolina. He has appeared on the History Channel, where he discussed Lumbee hero Henry Berry Lowry. He has published about the use of the word Lumbee prior to 1952 in Native South. And with Dr. Linda Oxendine, he co-authored Hail to UNCP, a 125-year history of the University of North Carolina at Pembroke in 2014. He served in numerous leadership capacities at UNCP and in the American Indian community at the tribal and state levels. He also co-chaired UNCP's 125th Anniversary Committee from 2011 to 2013, and he served 2 terms as Speaker of the Lumbee Tribal Council between 2005 and 2008. He's also provided service to the American Indian Women of Proud Nations, and he's been the Lumbee Tribe's representative on the Board of Directors for the United Tribes of North Carolina. He's also received numerous awards and honors, and he's a co-recipient of UNC Pembroke's inaugural Chancellor's Award for Excellence. We're very pleased to have him here today as he shares the work he's doing in the Office of Student Inclusion and Diversity, especially as we begin to work toward classes that are culturally responsive and inclusive as we meet the needs of our students and our very diverse student body. So Dr. Locklear, thanks for joining us today.
Dr. Hicks, thank you so much. I'm really excited for this opportunity to talk about the Office of Student Inclusion and Diversity and more importantly, how we can be a resource to students, faculty, and staff. And so during today's talk, I plan to talk with you a little bit about the diversity here at UNC Pembroke. We talked for, this university is well known for its diversity, and so I just want to go through and share a little bit about that with you. Then I want to talk about OSID's vision and mission statement, what intercultural engagement is, and how to become interculturally competent. And then I want to introduce you virtually to the staff that we have here in the office and talk a little bit about what we do as an office. And then I plan to share with you some best practices for creating an inclusive classroom, and then how to contact us. And then lastly, open the floor for any questions that you may have. And so when we look at UNCP's diversity, we know that UNCP was founded in 1887 to train American Indians, but fast forward to 2020 or 2019 from where this data comes, you can see that UNCP is very diverse, especially in terms of the racial and ethnic populations that we have on campus. African Americans make up about 31% of the student body, American Indians 13%, Asian and Pacific Islanders about 1.5%, our Hispanic Latinx community about 7.4%, and then Native Hawaiians, a very small population of less than 1%. Our white students make up about 39%, and then students who indicate they are 2 or more races or the race is unknown is about almost 7%. So you can see with these affinity groups, UNCP is very diverse. But our diversity, though, is not just along racial and ethnic lines. When you look at some other groups within the university, you'll see that commuters make up approximately 73% of our student body. So almost 3 out of every 4 students commutes to campus. First-gen students make up about 29%, and of the genders on campus, females make up about 63%. They're the largest gender. Our international students, we have about 100 students, and they represent about 1.3%. Military affiliated is about 15%, out-of-state 6%, and then rural students actually make up 2 out of 3 students. And so when you look at this group, you quickly realize that most of our students are commuters, they're female, and they come from rural communities. And I think all of that is very important, especially when you consider the backgrounds, experiences, worldviews that these students may have. I think these different backgrounds will definitely influence them. And so when you're thinking about the Office of Student Inclusion and Diversity, the best way I think to describe what we do is to look at our vision and mission. And this is a newly crafted vision and mission. And so when the vision, our goal is to be a leader in 3 very important things. One is developing interculturally competent students, and we're going to talk more about that in a few minutes, but also celebrating diversity, secondly, and then third, celebrating that diversity in an inclusive campus community where all of our differences are embraced as strengths. And so with our mission statement, how we're going to accomplish that is we plan to be very collaborative and innovative with what we do in the department, but also data-driven and student-centered. Students will be at the heart of everything that we do as a department. But also with our programming and education and training that we provide, we believe heavily that our goal should be to foster awareness, equity, mutual respect, and social justice for all of the identities that are represented on our campus. And that diversity includes race, age, ethnicity, sex, gender identity and expression, sexual orientation, ability, faith, religion, national origin, citizenship, social and economic class, ideology, and a number of others. So these are just a few examples. But the bigger, broader goal is that because of our commitment to intercultural engagement, we believe that our students will be better prepared to engage and contribute to a global society that is very diverse and interdependent. And so it's important, I think, for the presentation today to understand the difference between multicultural and intercultural. And you can see the 2 graphics below, or visuals below, will help explain that. A multicultural community is one where there exists a number of different cultural groups. They exist alongside each other. But when you look at intercultural means there's greater interaction between those cultural groups in a community. I believe that UNCP in the past, we've been a multicultural campus. It's very evident when you walk around campus and you see that. But moving forward, and particularly with OSID's new vision and mission, I want UNCP to become an intercultural campus where there is greater interaction between all of the diverse communities that we have here on campus. And so when you're talking about intercultural engagement, it does 2 very important things. The first one is that, of course, it leads to the building of an inclusive community. And by the constant engagement that occurs between diverse communities, it's going to ultimately result in the exchange of ideas and, more importantly, the development of healthy relationships between diverse communities. And so, as evident by, the recent events during the march in Pembroke just a few weeks back, there is a lot of diversity here, but we want those relationships and exchanges to be healthy and engaging and in a way that promotes an inclusive, more inclusive community. But secondly, intercultural engagement is also important to developing intercultural competence. And intercultural competence is defined as cognitive, affective, and behavioral skills that facilitate effective and appropriate behavior and communication during intercultural interactions. It basically just provides you with the skills necessary to navigate diverse communities, diverse perspectives, diverse situations. And so as a result of having those skills, our students, faculty, and staff will be more comfortable with the diversity that's represented here on campus. And so OSID's work, though, is informed through an intercultural engagement framework. This framework guides our approach to developing interculturally competent students, as well as celebrating diversity in an inclusive campus community. And so there's 3 stages to becoming interculturally competent. And if you see the visual, I think does a great job of illustrating that. During the very first stage, the very first thing that an individual should do is become aware of self, develop self-awareness. And that includes looking at one's own culture, their identity, and any underlying assumptions, values, limitations, worldview, or biases that they may have. And so that requires asking yourself some tough questions and challenging what you were taught and what you learned from family, friends, and your community, what's reinforced at the workplace. So developing that self-awareness is key, because the second part of that first stage of awareness is just learning about other communities, or becoming aware of other communities. And that includes learning about their culture, and particularly any similarities and differences that may exist between your culture and other cultures. The second stage is an understanding and knowledge of other groups. And an important part of this that can't be emphasized enough is that individuals should not be afraid to lean into any discomfort that sometimes accompanies growth. When you're challenging what you've been taught since you may have been a child, that's very uncomfortable, and it causes you to raise questions and flags about things, but that's a natural part of becoming interculturally competent. But during the understanding phase, get to know other members of the campus community. And while you're doing this, you begin to learn and see things from multiple perspectives, but also multiple contexts. I think it provides you with the ability to see things from a different view and understand why diverse communities may respond in different ways and how they see those things. But lastly, knowledge about issues of oppression and how it's affected marginalized cultures and identities is an important part of the understanding. And last is action. And this is a very important phase, because during this phase, you learn techniques for working and communicating with different groups. And this includes skills to combat biases, discrimination, but more importantly, how to facilitate an environment that is inclusive for everyone, regardless of their cultural background or identities that they may hold. And so in order to accomplish this work, I want to introduce you to my staff. Of course, I'm the director. I'm proud to announce that just last week, Victoria Walters started as the inaugural Assistant Director for Inclusive Education. She has a number of years experience in higher education. She has a master's degree in student affairs. And so she's already hit the ground running, collaborating. She's already started talking about different collaborations with different departments. And for many of you listening, we will be reaching out to you to collaborate on programming and training this fall. And lastly, most importantly, is Lisa Gonzalez Bullard. Lisa's been with the office since it was established in 2003, and so she'll have 17 years of experience working with the department. And so she brings a wealth of institutional and departmental knowledge to the work that we do. So I'm very excited to be working with Victoria and Lisa, and I think OSID has a bright future ahead. And so when we talk about what OSID does, 2 very important things come to mind. One is collaboration. Just know that any diversity, equity, and inclusion work, I believe, is the responsibility of the entire campus community. My office and our 3 staff, we can't do all the DEI work on campus. I think that every member of the faculty, staff, students, organizations, ever how you're tied into the university, that you should be deliberate and intentional about incorporating issues related to diversity and equity and inclusion into everything that you do. So again, it's not just OSID's job. We're here to help you out and help facilitate that process on campus. But more important, but also we do advise and we advocate for students. We believe in empowering students and developing their self-efficacy. So that's a huge goal of ours. So for the next few minutes, I want to talk with you about OSID, particularly our office space, and I'll show you why in a few minutes why I'm going to just talk with you about our space, but also about some of the programming we do, the education and training, resources we provide, and then opportunities for employment for students. And then I'm going to wrap the presentation up with some best practices for creating an inclusive classroom. When you come into our office this fall, you will see this quote on the wall. It's by Margaret J. Wheatley. And she said, be brave enough to start a conversation that matters. As soon as I first saw this quote, I instantly realized that, yes, this needs to be prominently displayed in our office. When Wheatley included this quote in her 2009 book, she was saying that be brave enough to start a conversation, communicate with folks, but more importantly, have conversations with folks that you do know, conversations with folks that you don't know, and more importantly, have conversations with people that you've never considered talking to. And in the polarized political climate that we're in right now, I think it's very important that we step across the aisle, that we have conversations with folks that we agree. And I know that it's challenging and it's difficult, but I think at the end of the day, it's very important that we build relationships, because politics is not the only thing that defines us or brings us together or separates us. There's a number of things to do that, but I think ultimately we do need to have that conversation. And so for those of you who've been in our office, when you visit in the fall, we've done a number of things to reorganize and refresh the space. One of the first things we did is that we repainted the office. The office feels much brighter and airier now. Making up words as we go. But we also ordered some brand new furniture for office, and this is important because we now have a student lounge, and this is an entire room that's dedicated to students, an opportunity for them to hang out, socialize, comfortable places to study. There's television, there's dry erase boards, tack boards. We even have tables that you can see in the photo in the upper right for where the height can be electronically adjusted. So if we have students in a wheelchair and they need somewhere to study, they can push a button and the table will automatically raise up. But you can see we've got a number of different places for students to study. We also have a conference room. It seats about 7. So feel free, if you want to have a small meeting, feel free to reach out to us to reserve conference room or the student lounge. We're more than glad to do that. But more importantly, our office space, we consider the entire office to be a safe space. And what I mean by that is it's a place where students, faculty, and staff can come and they can be themselves. We're very accepting of everyone's identity. We show respect for that identity, and we also believe in centering those identities, diverse identities, in everything that we do in this department. So please come by and take a look at the space, walk through. We do plan to hold an open house this fall, and more information will be forthcoming about that. But definitely come by and check us out. I know that with the COVID pandemic going on, it will restrict how we use the space, but I do want you just to become familiar with it and just think of potential ways that you can utilize it in the future. One of the things that we do in our office, major components of our work, is cultural awareness programming. And that's for all of the diverse communities that you can think of on campus. We celebrate the many awareness periods. That includes American Indian Heritage Month, Black Heritage Month, Hispanic Heritage Month, Pride Month, Irish American Heritage Week. We celebrate all of those in our department through a number of programming events and collaborations across campus. We also are in the process of establishing some awareness planning committees, and I plan to send out an email shortly about that. But what it is we're going to form committees related to each of the different awareness periods that are held during the year, with the goal to bring folks who are vested in those communities and events that relate to those communities, about bringing them together, forming a committee so we can be deliberate and intentional about what we do. As an example, say for November, American Indian Heritage Month, when the email is sent out, anyone who's interested in serving on that planning committee for those events can reply, and we'll pull that committee together so we can start planning those events now, so that when that American Indian Heritage Month comes around in November, we'll already have everything organized and we can share that with the campus community. So that email will be coming shortly. We also plan to hold, a number of critical conversations and town halls about a number of social justice related issues, particularly what's going on currently in the United States as well as here in the Pembroke community. So look for some more information, particularly on topics and dates. And we're also interested in collaborating with faculty and staff to co-facilitate or even facilitate some of those conversations and town hall meetings. So please let me know if you're interested in that. Another thing that we do is we provide education and training on a number of topics. We currently offer Safe Zone Education, which provides information about the LGBTQ plus community. We're also developing training on implicit or unconscious bias and microaggressions, and we plan to offer that at some point during the fall semester. Just look for emails on that. But if you are interested in Safe Zone education for your class or your office, please reach out to OSID. Give us a call at extension 6508 or send us an email at osid@uncp.edu. We do have a number of resources available, and many of those are online. If you go to OSID's website at uncp.edu/OSID and then click on the resources link, we have a number of online resources there, and some of those resources include how to have conversations about race, information about the diverse communities represented on campus, issues around anti-Blackness, there's a whole range of resources there, so check those out. And if you do run across resources, please share those with us, and we'll be more than glad to add those to our website. We've also recently initiated a faculty and staff resource database. I believe that many of our faculty and staff are content experts and are members of diverse communities and bring insight, knowledge, and experiences to the university that I think that we should utilize in our programming and our education. And this resource makes that available because it's a quick and easy way for us to find out who may have knowledge in certain areas. So if you're interested in being added to the database, please shoot me an email and I'll send you the list of questions that you can respond to. We also are in the process of subscribing to a number of magazines that may not be available in the library. We currently have subscriptions to Q Notes, which is about the LGBTQ community, also Winds of Change for American Indian students. We're looking at adding a number of other subscriptions here shortly for all of our diverse communities on campus. We plan on also developing rack cards. And what that is when you walk into our office, there's a cabinet that will have a card available for each of our diverse communities that has information about resources that are available for that community on campus. The information in the cards will also be available on our website. And last, we are looking to develop relationships with community partners. We've already reached out to Sand Hills Pride about being a partner, and we're working with others in the region and throughout the state on how we can bring resources to the campus that our students and faculty and staff can better utilize. Another component of what we do is employing students, and it goes beyond just having students to do administrative task force. We hire students so that they can learn more about diversity, equity, inclusion work. And so we want these opportunities to be developmental, opportunities to develop and enhance some professional goals. So a number of ways that can be done is we have Hawk assistants who work in our office, work study students. And we also have one research and programming assistant, and that research and programming assistant is a graduate student. We also have intercultural student ambassadors. They were formerly known as beads, but we changed the title of that group this semester to reflect the new vision and mission statement for the office. And these are students who will educate their peers on social justice and DEI issues and intercultural engagement through presentations and workshops. And this may be done to student organizations. These students may co-facilitate presentations to faculty and staff along with members of OSID. So it's an opportunity for students to develop their presentation skills, but also to learn about DE&I issues. We also collaborate with some academic departments to provide internships for students. So if you have a student that's looking for an internship, please reach out to us. But also we embrace volunteers in our office. So if you know a student, faculty, or staff who wants to contribute a couple hours or maybe co-facilitate or facilitate a presentation for us, please let us know. And so for the next few minutes, I just kind of want to share some best practices for creating an inclusive classroom. And what I've done is I've divided these practices up according to the 3 stages to becoming interculturally competent. If you remember, the first stage is awareness, the second is understanding, and the third is action. So during the awareness phase, the first thing that I encourage you as an instructor to do is focus on self-awareness. Don't be afraid to ask yourself some tough questions. I love this quote. It says, acknowledging my own power, rank, and privilege and recognizing the dynamics of racism and identity in the United States all helped me to create a climate where honest connections can be made across cultural divides. And so you need to ask yourself about your power, rank, and privilege, and understand how that impacts everything you do. So 2 questions come to mind. One, how does your power and privilege show up in your work with students? Take up space or silence others. Another is, do you and the academic materials you use uphold whiteness or lift up the voices and experiences of people of color? These are questions you need to ask. Also, I think it's important that you address personal biases, and this includes conscious and unconscious biases, address microaggressions, and particularly how they affect your teaching, your practice, and any decision making that you're involved with. Also with awareness is developing an awareness of your students. Take time to build relationships with your students, get to know them, learn about their background, experiences, where they're from, what they think about current issues, current topics. You know, we all know that if you develop relationships with students, then you're probably going to have students who are more committed to your class and to you as an instructor. So I encourage you to do that in any way that you can. So as far as moving into awareness as a best practice, one, I encourage you to seek out resources in books and professional development opportunities, but also talk to members of diverse communities and get their perspectives on things, because depending on the community, stances on certain issues are constantly evolving, and so resources and books and materials may be outdated versus having conversations with a community member who can give you an up-to-date stance on those issues. So I encourage you to do that. Also know that communities of color are not monolithic. They're not all the same. There's not one American Indian community, one Black community, one Latinx community, or one LGBTQ plus community. They're all different. So not everyone in those communities comes from the same economic background or a first-generation college student. So keep that in mind with your approach to students. Also think that you should acknowledge racism and the ideology of white supremacy in your teaching and how it has affected marginalized cultures and identities. And so with action, the 3rd stage. Love this quote. It says, teachers are powerful change agents. We all as instructors, and I think we recognize this, we all have the power to model and normalize culturally appropriate attitudes and behaviors. And I think one way that we can do that is when you're introducing yourself to your students on the first day of class, use your pronouns. Put your pronoun, use your pronouns to introduce yourself. Include pronouns in your syllabus because you don't want to be misgendered and you don't want your students to be misgendered. So ask students about their pronouns also. And so I think when students see that you are using those pronouns, they then will feel empowered to use those pronouns themselves. Also, I encourage you on the first day to get student feedback on community standards for sharing during class. I think students who have buy-in into those community standards will feel more comfortable in the space, and I think they'll feel more comfortable sharing those hopes and fears and just how they participate in class. So I think it will improve your participation in class if you get student buy-in on those community standards or norms. Again, instructors are powerful change agents, and one way that we can do that is to model inclusive language and behaviors. That includes abating any microaggressions that you see in class, also any inappropriate humor or language. Also, don't assume or misgender students. Ask students their pronouns, and more importantly, if a student shares their pronoun with you, please use those pronouns correctly. If you happen to make a mistake and use the wrong pronoun, apologize, use the correct pronoun, and just move on. But also, please use gender inclusive language. You know, instead of using like you guys, which is a gender term, you know, many of us from the South use y'all. Y'all means all, and that's something that you're going to hear a lot of student affairs folks say. Use y'all when you're referring to everybody in the class. Learn and pronounce student names correctly. I think that's very important. I want someone to pronounce my name correctly, so I I think all of our students feel that same way too. On the first day, ask students what name they wish to be called. That's very important. That's as important as recognizing what pronouns that they use. More importantly, or as importantly, recognize that women report that instructors tend to interrupt them more often than men, ignore them more often, call on them less often, and are asked more recall questions and less analytical questions. So please be mindful of that with your interaction with female students. And last, avoid using heteronormative and gender binary exclusive examples. There are a number of queer relationships and families and models that exist out there. Please use those examples also in your teaching, and please go beyond the male-female gender binary. There's a number of genders that examples that you can use in class. And if you're interested in learning more about those, OSID does offer safe zone training where you can learn more about the LGBTQ+ community. Other best tips include examining your curriculum. One question to ask yourself is, are certain perspectives not represented in your course materials? For example, are you offering a course on family that focuses only on traditional families, or are you offering a course on public policy that ignores the issue of race? I encourage you to welcome all voices and particularly challenge Western dominant paradigms in your curriculum design. Be mindful of including voices of American Indians, Black individuals, the various genders, indigenous communities from around the planet, Latinx community, LGBTQ+, the various religious and faith-based communities, and just any and all diverse communities. And particularly diversify the voices that students read about in your class. And I encourage you, if possible, to develop a process where students can help decide what course readings you offer in your class. And so, but though one thing to keep in mind when you're incorporating these diverse perspectives is try and do this without stereotyping and spotlighting or tokenizing those voices. And so and I've had a number of students say this to me, that during their classes, particularly when they were talking about a certain issue, that the professor would ask one student to speak on behalf of an entire community. I encourage you to not do this, because this may result in students feeling invisible in the class or sticking out like a sore thumb. Maybe like they think of themselves as a token member. Like every time we talk about this certain issue, a faculty member looks at me to say this. And so we can't do that, because we've talked about diverse communities are not monolithic and they're all different. But you also got to keep in mind, depending on what the issue you're discussing in class, the student who's from that community you're discussing may be there to learn more about the issue that's being discussed. So just be mindful of that. Also, you're required by law to provide accommodations for students who have documented disabilities, and you will receive information from the Accessibility Resource Center or the student about those accommodations. So please be mindful of providing those. Also, please address any complaints about biased behavior that occur in the classroom. Be prompt about it, be fair, and be thorough when you're addressing those biases. And one of the last best practices is advocate for a more diverse faculty. We talked about earlier about the diversity of our student body. Well, during the fall of 2019, of our faculty, 3 out of 4 of our faculty members were white. And between the African American and American Indian faculty, they make up about 13.4%. But when you look at our student body and compare those numbers to students, white students make up 38.8%, but yet faculty make up 73.4%. When you're talking about the African American and American Indian community, among the students, they make up 44% of the student body, but only 13% of the faculty are Black or Native. So advocate for more diverse faculty, and that's important because of you want to bring diverse experiences, worldviews, and backgrounds to the table, because I think they have a way of highlighting and looking at things from different perspectives. And I think that is key to what we do in education. So please advocate for that diversity. And the last best practice is, this is a great resource I found. It's on Iowa State University's Center for Excellence in Learning and Teaching website. And it's a checklist of strategies for creating an inclusive classroom. And there's a number of items for how to establish a positive climate in your class, how to self-reflect on your teaching, course design, teaching strategies, evaluation practices, and student feedback. So it's a checklist, I think, of about 3 or 4 pages. I suggest that you check that out because it's very helpful and very informative. And so I want to close with just a couple quotes, couple statements. In the book How to Be Anti-Racist, Kendi wrote, quote, "The opposite of racist isn't non-racist, it is anti-racist. One either allows racial inequities to persevere as a racist or confronts racial inequities as an anti-racist. Excuse me, there is no in-between safe space of not racist," unquote. And so author Dina Simmons suggested how we can respond to that quote as an instructor or teacher. And she says, quote, "Teaching for an anti-racist future starts with us, the educators. An anti-racist educator actively works to dismantle the structures, policies, institutions, and systems that create barriers and perpetrate race-based inequities for people of color. Educating students to see and respect the humanity and dignity of all people should be a national imperative, especially if we want to heal and have a future as a nation," unquote. So I just want to remind you that, again, teachers are powerful change agents, and we have the power to model and normalize culturally appropriate and anti-racist behaviors and attitudes. And so if you're interested in reaching out to the Office of Student Inclusion and Diversity, we are located in historic Old Main. If you want to visit the office, you'll need to enter Old Main from one of the side entrances. You can't access us from the front of the building. But we are here from 8 to 5, Monday through Friday. Please check out our website or shoot us an email. But we are also on social media. We are on Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, and Instagram, and our handle is Inclusive UNCP. So thank you, everyone, for listening today, and hopefully you learned a little bit more about the Office of Student Inclusion and Diversity, particularly our vision and mission, and also some helpful tips on creating an inclusive classroom. And so now I'll open the floor up to any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Dr. Locklear. I'll just ask a few questions that have come up on the chat. First of all, thank you so much for this presentation, the person writes. And they want to know more about what the Safe Zone training looks like, what it consists of. They're interested in this training for their office.
Okay, great question. So the Safe Zone training, it's an opportunity to learn more about the LGBTQ community, particularly terminology that's used, what it means to be an ally. And it also provides some data about the challenges that members of the LGBTQ community face. Talks about how to be an ally, talks about how to create a safe space. It lasts the training is about an hour and a half long. We can do it virtually. And to schedule that training, just reach out to Student Inclusion and Diversity, and we'll be more than glad to provide you with that training.
Thank you. Another question, I think it relates back to setting the community standards. Faculty member writes that they begin by having students talk about what it means to be respectful in class and to hear one another. I set the tone during the first class to be respectful to different voices, to agree to disagree, to ensure that everybody can voice his or her own voice and be respected without fear, the individual writes. I wonder if you might talk about how to set those community standards in an online-only setting or in a hybrid setting.
Well, I think the key again is to have that conversation I think again, it's about building relationships, and I know virtually that is very challenging. But I think to do that virtually, I think it's important to have those discussions as a class, one-on-one. I think having those conversations with peers, one-on-one with their colleagues, excuse me, with the students in their class, I think that's going to be important. I think it's just a matter of just having the conversations. It could be via email, via chat. There's a number of ways that you can do that, but I think that's some of the best ways to do it virtually. And I hope that answered your question.
Well, I liked your point too about working with students to design the course readings. I think one of the things that's important to reinforce, as you noted, that our student body is much more diverse than our faculty in some ways, and that when we draw on our students and bring them in as partners, whether it's to set the community standards or to determine class readings or to give presentations, we're able to sort of leverage and sort of embody that diversity in our teaching. One of the ways that you can sort of work with students in that way in a group setting is through Google Docs, for example. So there's a wonderful ways to collaborate. And I'll take one more question from the chat, and then I'll just sort of open it up to the group. What are your thoughts about raising the population or percentage of representation of American Indians at UNCP? A faculty member noted the demographics from your earliest slide, I believe, and wants to know about how to raise that population.
I think that what we have to do is be intentional about how we recruit these individuals. There's certain, and I think this is true of all diverse communities, there are networks, communication networks within those communities. We need to find ways to get in those communities. We need to be more proactive. I think we need to be present at national, regional, and state conferences. We need to get on listservs. We need to, word of mouth, especially in Indian country, is very important. I think we just need, I think we as an institution need to be present more in Indian country. And I think folks know about, in Indian country, know about UNC Pembroke and know why we were founded. I just think that we need to make ourselves more visible. We need to be on boards, panels, just need more of a presence there. But also be deliberate about how we recruit, but also how we retain Native peoples, because many Native folk, when they get advanced degrees, there's opportunities to make more money outside of higher education. And so I think it's a great opportunity, but that's a challenge to increasing our percentage of Native faculty and staff. But I think that there's ways that we can be attractive to those individuals. So I think we just need to be more deliberate about what we do.
Thank you. I'll bring up one more thing from the chat I see. One person has commented that a rule we set up in group discussion is listening to understand versus listening to respond. If you focus on understanding another person's point of view rather than proving them wrong, you might find valuable ideas or considerations on quote unquote the opposing side. Another person commented that how do you sort of dismantle fear in the classroom when someone is afraid to be perhaps who they are, or to say who they are, or feels that they're being disrespected or threatened or challenged. So in this sort of listening to understand and then sort of giving voice to our fears, what do you tell faculty or students about being fearful and handling other people's fear, or accepting or working with other people's fears as well?
Well, I think, like I said during the presentation, I think it starts with the faculty member, particularly the power that a faculty member has to normalize certain behaviors and attitudes. I think when faculty themselves use pronouns or talk about diverse communities, I think that encourages and empowers students to have those same conversations. As far as differing opinions and listening to those and fears that students may have, I think it's about building relationships in a class. I know that I've taught a number of classes here on campus, and the focus is for students to learn, but I think what students can learn from each other and the relationships that they build can be as impactful or even more impactful about what they can learn from each other and those relationships that they develop. I mean, I think that many times while they move on to different classes and learn new things, I think the relationships they learn or develop in the classes will carry with them, and I think those relationships can help promote easing those fears and normalizing certain behaviors and attitudes.
Thank you. Any other questions or discussion from those on the WebEx? And feel free to unmute yourself and ask those questions or share your ideas at this time.
Dr. Locklear, the Miconino here. A great presentation, lots of useful information. I just wanted to take the opportunity to repeat something that you mentioned that it's key, and it's something that we have witnessed that happens quite often. There's a lot of work done in the face-to-face classrooms. For some reason, I'm assuming because there's no that physical connection in the online space, there's a tendency not to pay attention to these best practices when working online. And now that definitely we are having a higher number of online courses, I believe it's really important to think about ways of applying this to online spaces as well. So I just wanted to emphasize that point that you mentioned because I agree, it's very important. Thank you so much. This was a great presentation.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments?
This is Tina Barr. I teach in the social work department, and I just want to share one of the things that I do in most of my classes. I start each class with a student selected current event issue, whatever's going on, their choice. And students are assigned, they know which day they have, so they're prepared to bring it in. So they have to summarize the issue, and then I require them to facilitate the discussion. There's a lot of conversations about race issues and other very sensitive topics. They don't shy away from that. So I step back, I have them facilitate the discussion. The only time I interrupt is if they make a blanket statement or if they make an assumption. Because we are talking about race issues, then, students typically start out in the beginning of the semester making assumptions about an entire group or making blanket statements about an entire group. And so I don't even speak up when I interrupt. I actually have two signs. One is a big sign that says blanket statement, and the other is an assumption. So they know when I hold that up, they check themselves. I don't say anything, I just hold it up, they check themselves. And so over the course of, the first several weeks, they get into the habit of no longer making assumptions, or at least checking themselves when they do make assumptions or say blanket statements about an entire group of people. And so usually by a third of the way into the semester, the conversations are still difficult, but they have learned to facilitate the conversations, and they have learned to not make the assumptions. And if they do, to think about it. They catch themselves by a third or halfway into the semester. So in doing evaluations at the end of the semester, that is for many students their favorite part, not only because they've had the opportunity to discuss some very difficult subject matters, but I give that responsibility to them and I stay out of it. Now, of course, at the end, I always wrap things up and add my final 2 cents and point anything out. But I think that teaches them to, from their feedback, it teaches them to learn how to disagree with people in a very respectful manner. And yes, in the beginning of the semester, before I even start this, there's a conversation about the expectations, and they kind of set the rules for how they would like the discussions to go when there's disagreement, when things might get heated. But in all of the semesters I've been doing that now, I have not yet gotten to a point where things were so difficult that it created tensions or it ended badly. I think by giving the students the responsibility, of course, with my guidance, if they need it, I'm there, but giving them the responsibility, they take it seriously and they learn about having those difficult discussions in a very different way because they're leading them. So I just wanted to share that.
Thank you. I bet your students especially like knowing that you're going to call out the blanket statements and assumptions. I bet they appreciate knowing that you are there to sort of referee in that way. And I bet that gives them a lot of power to think critically as well as to explore some difficult issues. Thanks for sharing that.
You're welcome.
Other comments, questions, thoughts? If there are no other questions, I'll just ask Dr. Locklear one final question, and that would be this. What are some ideas or some programs or some events that you would like to plan with faculty in your dream world for OSID? What kind of ideas would you like for faculty to come to you with and you'd love to roll with?
Oh, wow. That's a great question. As I mentioned during my presentation, we're planning a number of town halls and critical conversations. So with the town hall will be with a larger audience, and the critical conversations will probably be more intimate small group discussions. So if faculty have any areas of expertise or subjects or topics that you wish just to discuss in either a town hall setting or a critical conversation setting, please reach out to me, because I do want to utilize the knowledge that our faculty has. I mean, I consider faculty to be an extension of the staff that we have here in the office, and I definitely would like to utilize that in a number of ways. But also, like you suggested, please send us suggestions. You know, I would like to think that we are have all the wonderful and great ideas for addressing diversity, equity, and inclusion on campus, but I know that many of you have ideas and experiences that can help inform what we do. So please reach out to us and share those with us. Our door's always open, our email box is open, and we're checking it constantly. So please send those to us. But also, if you have any programming, any creative programming, any student-centered programming that you wish to collaborate with or share with us, you may be in a situation where you can't coordinate that entirely yourself, and you may need some assistance. Please let my office know. That's what we're here for. So we're open for any ideas and suggestions that you may have, because collaboration is going to be key, I think, to addressing the many issues that we have on campus, but also developing interculturally competent students and creating that inclusive campus community that we've talked about.
Thank you. I noted that in the chat, and I'll make sure to underscore that in any future communications from the TLC. So if there are no other questions or comments, I just want to wrap up by thanking Dr. Locklear. This has been a wonderful presentation, and I really appreciate knowing the resources we can use and continue to use, even as we might be teaching more and more online. I want to let everyone know, too, that we have one upcoming session, and the kickoff of our Accessibility in the Classroom series. So if you're interested in earning a certificate of accessibility and inclusion in teaching and learning, the 6-week short course offered online by the UNC system and NC State University kicked off yesterday. It will end August 31st. Please check your earlier email from Alicia Giles or contact me if you would like a link to that course so that you can begin it now and undertake your certification for accessibility and inclusion. Also, put on your calendar for July 28th at 1 p.m., the same location in Dr. Nino's room. We're going to have a presentation on the power of culturally responsive teaching, led by Camille Goins and Leslie Locklear, who are the conveners and leaders of a shared interest group now in its 3rd year, working with the TLC to provide culturally responsive teaching, professional development for faculty across UNCP. So on July 28th at 1 p.m. here in Miko's WebEx room, we'll be talking about the power of culturally responsive teaching. So thanks again, everyone. Have a great day, and we will see you at our next webinar. Bye-bye.